So I know what you're probably thinking. This is some kind of trick, right? Is the video playing, or they brought back the Blender game engine? Nope. Unlike most people, I'm actually mentally ill enough to make this shit in GeoNodes. The system contains nearly 4,000 nodes, making it by far my biggest project. Me, there's code right there, you lied to me. Look, all the logic and visuals are done in the node system. Scripting is only used to place audio strips in the timeline and allowing for keyboard inputs to move the controller. I only used scripts when there was literally no other alternative. I initially thought that I could use speakers, however, for even more proof, there's an unedited playthrough at the end, as well as the blend file download link in the description. Now, with this additional context, you might be thinking things like, who hurt you? What's wrong with you? How do you even do something like this? Now on to the last answer. I started by parenting the camera to a vertex triangle. This allows for the node system to move the camera. I constructed a basic controller that can either be controlled manually or using the script. I put in some logic that takes the position of the controller and converts it into camera movement. I used the raycast node to figure out where the floor was and put the camera slightly above that. I then also used the raycast node to figure out if there was a wall in front of the camera. If there was, I simply just stopped you from being able to move. If I didn't, you'd just be able to clip through the wall. However, this movement is kind of boring, so I did some additional math to add head bobbing and momentum to the camera. This makes it feel a lot more lively. I then added items. For each item there is a manually placed point in 3D. Per point there is a plane placed on it, and with animated items there are multiple objects swapped out on that point. It's then aligned tangent to the player's position to get that 2D effect. For the health items it gets a little bit more complicated. The distance between the player and the item is calculated. If the player is too close to the item, it will activate. This deletes the point, as well as passing a number 1 through a single frame. This then goes all the way through, where we can see the values for health and armor is stored. But how is it displayed, I hear you ask? Well, it starts with a base image. I removed the unlocked weapons section and made a custom Blender logo, just as a nice touch. Then, I placed points. I then have a bit of logic that swaps out these planes based on the relevant parameters. The only real interesting one here is the Slayer's face. I have 6 collections for different health stages that include 4 different expressions: look forward, look left, look right, and hit. Firstly, it decides the correct collection. Then I select the correct expression with an index. When all of these elements are placed correctly, it's then set to be slightly in front of the camera and then aligned perfectly to match the FOV. Now this is finally starting to resemble the final game. And at this point I figure that around 90% of the comments on this video are going to be inundated with a suggestion to make some form of first-person shooter, like Doom 2016 or Eternal. This is what it took me to make a semi-accurate replication of a single level of a game that was made 10 years before I was even born. Look, I'm gonna give you guys a deal. If this trash video somehow gets 69,069 people to subscribe, I'll make whatever game is voted most in the comments. Now back to the game. It's really cool so far, but there's no enemies, so it's shit. So now I have to replicate an enemy pathing system inside of geometry nodes. There's 7 different case variables that lead into 3 walk functions. The first check is to see if it can see the player. It checks to see if the distance between the player is shorter than the distance between the wall. If the player is in front of the wall, then it means that we can see the player. And the chart goes as follows. If it's never seen a player or is currently in a shoot state, the position is locked. It then checks if it's about to hit a wall or if it can't see the player. When it goes into the walk state, it'll simply pick a direction to walk for a random amount of time. If it is not able to shoot the player, it uses a simple pathfinding algorithm done with this math. For the pathing system, I like to think of them as chess pieces. To replicate how they play in Doom, they offset the current position by a small amount in the direction a bishop would move. Then it determines the closest position by measuring the distance between it and the player. If the X or Y position matches within a tolerance of 1 meter, it will instead move in the direction of a rook. If, after all of this, the conditions to shoot the player are met, it enters the shoot state. This takes about a second. The zombie will have a random chance to damage the player. The imp spawns a point and stores the velocity as a vector. For each frame it displaces the point by the amount stored on it, and it checks the proximity to the player. If it comes close enough to the player, the displacement stops, it damages the player, and it plays an animation of the particle exploding. And you know, that's about it.
Alright then, buddy. I'm going to shit yourself.